And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation, excuse me, by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at www.town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. Watch live on youtube.com/Westborough TV or on Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192. Or watch a recorded version on the website westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort is being made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means, Westborough TV. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And Jeff Poole from Westborough TV, I take it you got that all. Jeff? Where did he go? Oh, well. Well, I'm going to record from my. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. So first order of business is review and approval of past minutes. And then John Arnold would like to inform you guys of something. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of March 11th? That's meeting number 17, 2021.
Motion to approve the minutes of March 11th, 2021.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Okay, so we'll go around the room, so to speak, for a roll call. Ms. Bloomberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Mr. Ugal,
Yes.
Mr. Leslie,
Yes.
Mr. Rauch,
Yes.
and Beretti, yes.
All right. So I'll just jump in
John?
here. Oh, you all set?
Yep, go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a couple minutes of your time tonight. Won't take too long. I wanted to let you know that as I mentioned it the last time, over the past couple weeks, I've had some good conversations with a couple of qualified candidates. And over the weekend, I made a difficult decision, though I'm hoping that the other candidate I talked to might be willing to join whenever there's another vacancy. But yesterday, I appointed Zafar Siddiqui, who you may recognize the name from having run for planning board in the latest election. He's an anesthesiologist. He has an MBA from UMass Amherst and is interested and certainly seems qualified to essentially continue on doing some more public service in Westborough. So unfortunately, by the time I got the appointment letter out, he already had a prior commitment for this evening. So I just wanted to let you know that the 9th member has been appointed. He's going to get sworn in either today or tomorrow. And I look forward to doing a brief introduction and letting him introduce himself at your next meeting or the next upcoming meeting where his schedule's freed up. So just wanted to let you know you're back at full strength and looking forward to his contributions as well as all of your contributions. And now I'll let you get back to your meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Uh,
Any
Michael,
questions?
oh, not a question on that. I had a question on the minutes.
Go ahead, Walter.
Oh, So my question is, how, now that those minutes are approved and no longer draft, how do they get sent off or put on the webpage or all that type of stuff?
I send them off to web support, but you could do that.
But yeah, I'm happy to do that. Maybe offline, you can just send me
Yeah.
who to send it to. I'll
Okay.
remove the word draft and send it there.
And the
Okay.
town
I know
clerk,
that as we
town clerk-
discussed the other day, they haven't been updated in a long time,
Yeah.
apparently.
yeah, the town clerk needs to get a copy too for the official record.
Okay. Thanks,
Gee,
Walt.
gee, if we had an admin, that problem would be solved.
I sent you guys information on that. I'm hoping they started the recruiting process. Because Christie indicated that she was going to begin looking at recruiting for that instead of trying to juggle committees around or juggle admins from committees. Okay, Hank?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's get into tonight's business. The principal item on the business is a preliminary review of the town warrant articles. I want to thank Walter for putting together the worksheet.
No, Hank.
I think you want to thank
Did I-
Paul or somebody else,
Paul.
not me.
My mistake.
Sooner or later, we get you, Paul. Don't worry.
I'm invisible.
I apologize, Paul. So what I thought we'd do is just go through article by article to see if there's any question, not asking the question at that point, then we'll circle back to those articles that the members may have some questions about. Does that seem to work, guys? It's a little, I think that's a more efficient way to go at it. So, yes, Beth.
Can I just ask, what was the date of the email with the most recent version? Of
It
the
was Friday and you got version 6.
From Christy Williams.
Yeah, thank you, because I knew I saw it, but hunting for it was another story.
You have it now?
I'll get it momentarily. I originally was going to try and use 2 computers and the other one is not working, so
Okay.
I'm doing the small screen thing.
All right, so Article 1, Town Reports. Any concerns or questions? Article 2,
The
Yes.
question may be for John. Does the finance committee have to do a report?
That's the recommendation at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, typically the Article 1 for the town reports is where I would have the chair of the finance committee essentially summarize and point out the highlights of the report and recommendations. And typically the selectmen ask for the town manager to do a sort of state of the town thing. So
Okay, good.
it's really just it's the 5 or 10 minutes that likely Mike and Christy will take to just sort of introduce what's going on. And that's the chance for the finance committee to draw special attention to the message to the voters and anything else they want people to pay attention to.
okay. Article 2 is concerns the budgets. I'd like to skip over that now because, you know, we've got the changes. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, at some other point. Article 3 is regular recurring articles. Any questions that we need to be concerned with there? Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I think we need to just open for discussion. Do we want to maintain the reserve fund at 250,000? Because I think we should be like talking about it and making an active decision.
Okay, we'll just tick that off to come back to, Beth, and then we'll talk about that a little more detail.
Yeah, I guess I want to raise too that Article C and B, I don't know why they're recurring articles rather than someone's budget. And
Okay.
so I'd like to.
We'll come back to Article 3 in a few minutes. Let's just get through these and eliminate those that we really don't have to have a
And
conversation.
I had a question on 3B, so.
On 3 as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Article 4, the July 4th block party. I have a question on that one. Does anybody else?
One question's enough.
Okay. Article 5, Lake Chauncey treatment. Anybody?
My only question is, is the rec department working with the Board of Health for these two very similar things? And if Christie could think about putting those two articles juxtaposed in the final version.
So it sounds
Okay.
like we're going to talk about them. Why don't we talk
Yeah.
about 5 and
Yeah.
6?
Yeah,
No, it's 6.
they are juxtaposed already. Okay.
Yeah, 5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you want to talk about?
Oh, I thought we were gonna,
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna eliminate the ones we're not gonna talk
Right.
about, but
That's-
come back and talk about 5 and 6.
That's
So
right.
I'm just circling the ones we're gonna come back and talk about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly
Oh,
right.
yep. And yeah, we should couple them, I think.
Right. Capital improvement issues, A through blah, 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 H, J.
I have one, it's more of a question so I can learn something, question, but it's not, it's related to the article.
All right, well, just we'll come back to, which one?
7D. And,
D,
yeah,
as in Delta, okay.
Delta. And, yes, that's it, sorry.
I have a question on all of them taken together.
Okay,
Right. I think that I don't have any question. I think this is one of the ones where we wait till the end to see how the budget feels, in case that we decide that something has to be the low hanging fruit of this
Yep.
plan.
Yeah.
Because individually, they're reasonable.
yeah, no, you're right, Beth, that this is kind of the low hanging fruit, as you put it. But in going through the articles, we might find that we need to bring somebody in to help explain it to us.
Right.
Anybody else?
Okay, so I'm circling all 7A through K for conversation.
Good, because I have questions on a couple of them as well.
Okay.
Article 8,
Oh, just one more comment here on sorry, while we're in here, if
Yeah.
I'm following the check sheet, and we have capital stabilization fund with an amount plugged in between 7C and 7D. So let's just find out why that is.
yeah, Paul
And-
said he was going to look at,
There's
One of the
there's no
older-
article in, there is no article, so
Yeah.
it's just an error. It needs to be taken out of there because there's no article.
But I don't know where that number comes from and if it affects the bottom line.
Yeah, it's
Again,
because
there's no article, so it's null. It's totally null. It has no impact on anything.
I'll delete it on the next version. I think I deleted the first, what I saw on my screen and didn't get it all. That was there was an article deleted.
okay,
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
thank you, Paul.
Sorry about that.
It
No
happens.
worries.
Hey, thank you for making that worksheet.
You're welcome.
So,
Article 8, open space. Any questions on that? Article 9, body worn cameras for the police department. Any questions on that? Article 10, stormwater infrastructure, DPW. Article 11, town sewer system. Updates, anything? Article 12, improvement to the Westborough treatment plant. Article,
So-
yes,
The only thing that I would say about 11 and 12 is it's a $1.8 million expenditure and a $4 million expenditure. So we might do well to hear from DPW and let them present the case to us before they go to town meeting.
okay.
It's not DPW, it's the wastewater treatment folks. If you want to bring somebody in, I can have somebody come in.
Okay,
Okay, we'll look at bringing in people when we talk about future agendas.
okay,
Article 13, extended contract for the electric vehicle charging stations. I think I know the town manager and the finance director do or are anticipating making themselves available to us.
yeah, I would definitely like some more information about that, especially given the location is the golf club.
Yep. Article 14.
I mean, you know they exist, right?
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they exist. They've been installed. They've been there for
I
a couple
thought
of
we
years.
weren't discussing them.
I've seen people using them. And the only reason after a golf course is because that was that's a piece of land the town owns that's in a convenient location. Has nothing to do with golf, has nothing to do with the restaurant, just happens to be his town-owned land and it was a
Okay, Hank.
convenient location.
Okay, guys, let's hang on.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Hank. Article 14, acceptance of easements, West Park Drive. Anybody?
I assume this is just areas that have finished being built and,
Looks that way.
Well, you got to accept the easement before you can do anything with it.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
A
for the
legal requirement.
traffic lights.
It's a legal technicality, okay?
yeah.
Article 15, same, anything? Article 16, town seal review. You know, any questions on this?
I think we should review it.
Okay. We'll come back to it.
It's not financial. It's kind of a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
Okay.
But it's just formation of the committee.
Yeah, I mean, is forming the committee a big deal or is changing the seal a big deal?
Changing the seal is a big deal.
Well, I mean, maybe forming a committee's not.
Okay.
All right, we'll come back to it. We'll circle back.
Okay. Okay.
Article 17, establishing a disability commission.
I have a question on that.
Okay. Article, oh, did I miss 18? Article 18, facility rental revolving account. Article 19, amendment of the bylaws to change Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Did some committee go through this with a fine tooth comb to find all the sightings for selectmen?
I'm assuming they did, but I found a couple already in the articles
That
are
were missed?
Yeah, I'll show you when we get there.
Okay, so then we may want to look at that just to make, because it seems inappropriate to to change the bylaws without being really careful.
Agreed.
I don't know if it's something that
Wording
circled.
of the article says to change it wherever it is. It doesn't do an exhaustive list, I just noticed.
Oh,
It
okay,
authorizes the change.
okay.
I'm sure
Did
the
you-
town council will be pleased to bill hours to do this for us.
Yes, he will. Yes,
But
he
because
will.
usually, I was going to say, when there's a bylaw like this, in the content, I mean, and this is essentially the whole bylaws, we show every bloody page and change, like for planning board bylaw changes and charter changes.
Are we gonna come back to this? Are we talking about?
Yeah.
that?
Let's do 19 and 20 and get more
Let's do
information
19
on what's
and 20
happening.
together.
And 21.
21 and 22 and no, sorry, 21.
Yep.
Okay. Anything on Article 22 regarding the, including the Facilities Department in Department of Public Works? Article 23, timing of town meeting and town election. I have a feeling we have a gentleman here tonight that can explain that to us when we circle back to it. If we
Okay.
need to. Article 24, town meeting quorum. I have a question on that, and John, I know you could help us. Article 25, amending bylaws with respect to licensing of solicitors and canvassers. Article 26, amend the bylaws, the general bylaws with respect to animal control and poultry bylaw.
I'm all good with it. I watched the entire public hearing, so I've had all my questions answered.
I actually would like, the public hearing was before they made the changes that are in version 6, and I agree with you, Jody, that, anyway, I'd like to hear
Talk about it.
an updated presentation.
Great.
If it isn't
All right.
done somewhere else.
Let's,
That
All
we
right,
can watch.
thank you, Paul, Walter.
Okay.
Let's go back to Article 3. We had a question with respect to the regular recurring articles, A through D. Who was up first?
I don't know if I was first. I just had a question on B and C. B and C, does anyone know why it's here and not in budgets? I know it's been here since I've been here, and I don't know what.
That's a great question.
And that's a question for the town manager about why why these get voted in regular and recurring and not in departmental budgets. So when she comes, let's just make sure we ask her that question.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna ask one question. Is this something that we want to do as a regular and recurring thing? Or do we want to have the option to say no some years?
I would think that we want to ask the recreation department whether they consider this to be something they want to be part of their budget.
Well, you're talking about 3.
So it's the recreation department who's asking for the money, right?
Yes.
Not for tuition reimbursement.
Yeah, so for B, I agree with you that, should it be part of the recreation department budget?
For B, I mean, if we ought to, if you have a question, we ask the recreation director, ask Jennifer if this is something that she would like to make part of our annual budget. And if so, why she hasn't done that up till now.
And then similarly, I feel like the tuition reimbursement has been moved around, and it was part of the way that the town manager saved. I mean, I know we have an obligation to pay for the contractual tuitions, but I feel like this used to be in her budget.
This is a one-time occurrence, this number here. This is specific.
It's not a routine expenditure. It is often not expended. We don't budget it because we don't know ahead of time who's going to ask for it. So we set some money aside. We set we raise and appropriate some money for it. Again, if you want to ask her again, fine. We've talked about it before and say, okay, good, let's keep doing it.
It's in the explanation that's already there.
In the explanation.
It says that this was the outcome of collective bargaining unit and personnel policies. That happens every 3 years. It doesn't happen every year. So I'm sure when they settled the contracts, they found out that this is what they need to raise to cover the obligations of the contract.
Which means it's a financial policy issue where the governing body is the Board of Selectmen, and we really shouldn't. We can input to the Board of Selectmen, but we shouldn't be challenging their choices as a governing body.
I need to ask a general question for my knowledge. The things that we vote in, specifically Article 3, are the money for those available not until July 1st? And
none of the money's available till July 1st.
okay, whereas the
Right.
capital items, are they available
items,
immediately?
the expenditure cannot be made until July 1st, but they can make a commitment of the expenditure as long as the invoice doesn't come in till after July 1st.
Okay, so that's why the fire chief could say, I can order the truck right away.
Right.
Because
Right,
it's
he
not
can make the
coming for a year
commitment,
or
but
two
he-
anyway.
He
Okay.
can't make the commitment without the budget authorization, but once he has the authorization, he can make the commitment. He just can't pay the invoice.
Got it. So the stocking of the Sandra Pond we're talking about is for next spring, not this spring,
Right.
in this article.
Well, I don't know when they do the stocking, but
You do it in the spring.
it's for
I'm very familiar with
fiscal year. It will be done during fiscal year 2022. It can't be done in fiscal year 2021. That's the new fiscal year 2021.
Thanks.
Yeah,
This,
you
this
check
would,
with Steve, but my understanding is a free cash article can be done anytime because the town already has the cash. It's
I
the
mean-
raise and appropriate or the borrowing that would have to be done in the next fiscal year, I believe. But you should check with Christie to explain it.
All right, but I'm asking that because there are people concerned, because last year we didn't pay for this money, so there is no money,
Right.
and our town meeting's so late, and they're talking about whether they want to fund, or they're trying to fundraise for it. And I was a little confused about, even if the town meeting was in March, it wasn't clear to me that that money was available for this spring anyway, so that is a question, I guess, for Kristen.
This is why this should be in the budget of the Recreation Department.
Yeah,
We've spent, 5
But
minutes on
again,
this one
if they would
already.
like it in their budget, then they ought to come tell us that and,
Right.
You know-
and get agreement from the Board of Selectmen and the town manager that that's the appropriate thing to do.
So there's a
What-
long history to the Santa Pond funding, and I ended up, I think it was last year, Googling back to, there wasn't always consensus that it should be restocked every spring. But if we have moved to consensus that it should be restocked every spring for $4,000, we need to hear from the Recreation Department what the status of that is.
Well, Christie, not to add more fodder to this, Christie said there will be some more requirements for additional money for the Sandra Pond article.
Which
So
Sandra
that
Pond
would
article,
come
the
in
one to
person.
deal with the algae or the one to stock the pond?
That's Chauncey.
That's Chauncey with the algae, Hank. This is Stock the Pond,
So they're gonna need more money to put fish in the pond?
I guess. Maybe fish has gotten expensive.
well,
I don't know.
they are expensive. Civic Club used to sponsor these for a few years, but
Mhm.
I guess the point is we need to talk to Kristen. So,
Well, Christie's coming back in. Yeah,
Great.
Walter,
one more question.
yeah, Christie and Leah will be coming back in and we'll be able to resolve this.
Yep.
Any other questions on discussion on Article 3 items?
Well, on 3A, I think leaving, and which Beth raised as we did the review, I would say that what we're setting aside for reserve funds has been working just fine.
Okay,
And I don't see a reason to change it.
It's actually 350. I thought it was 252, but there's 50,000 from
Yep.
two other funds here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
no, our
because
reserve
it's sewer
Right.
retained earnings and water retained earnings has to come to us for approval to use those emergency funds.
Yeah, I guess
And
they
then-
can only be used in those categories. Well, they could only be used in those categories.
Yeah,
correct.
and the the 250 is available to us through the AFC through free cash. I don't see a reason to be changing those amounts.
Anything else on 3? Article 4 is the July 4th block party. Any concerns? I have just a little bit of a concern that we need a party, I think. I do think we need a party. And the question is whether or not we can perhaps get some of our local businesses to sponsor.
I think this amount allows for this amount is like seed money. I don't
Yeah.
think this amount pays for what we really do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure when it comes time to vote, we'll all have made up our minds. Article 5 and 6. Some of you raised issues about the nutrient evaluation and the treatment.
So this is coming up a lot in the master plan discussions under the public health. It's because it was inserted there in that subcommittee. So the algae blooms, are a health impact and they close the beach, and that's been a regular problem. So they have the treatment set up, but the treatment does carry environmental concerns. So the real solution is to do a nutrient evaluation around the entire pond and figure out the sources of phosphorus that are leading to the algae blooms and trying to reduce or eliminate those. So that's why they need the treatment to make the pond usable in 1 year, but that should not be done year over year. So the evaluation study will give the data for the long-term solution to the algae blooms.
Okay.
I don't know if this was in the joint meeting or somewhere else, another one of the meetings they hadn't yet pursued any state angle on this, whether it's funding and it seemed obvious to me that maybe the state offers this kind of a study or would pay for it or, that type of thing. So it sounded like they were moving in that direction, but hadn't thought of it up to that point. So I'd like to get more on that if there's anybody moving on that, because That's all.
Anything else?
Who's sponsoring the study?
I think it's,
Town manager,
what?
town manager is the
Uh,
proponent.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the, must have been the conservation officer or director that,
We ought to ask the concert, I mean, again, the person who ought to be speaking to this is the conservation officer or the recreation director, one or the other.
Yeah.
Because
Board of Health.
one or the other is responsible for Lake Chauncey.
The real question then comes up, not specifically to these articles. When we talk about who we need to speak to, the question is, do we really need to bring them into the meeting, or can the liaisons handle the questions? So as we go through these things, let's just keep that in the back of our head. It's simply, again, a question of creating some efficient way to get through these, to get through our work and get through the articles.
because I had another thought. I think they said 3/4 of the lake is state-owned too, so another reason the state should be involved, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay.
Are you suggesting that the town shouldn't appropriate the $25,000 until after we've explored the possibility of getting the state to give us money? Or are you suggesting that in addition to reappropriating $25,000, we ought to ask the state to share the cost?
I'd say, since we have time, I'd like to find out if they can get us more information before we vote on it.
Information about what? I mean, again, there's no way you're going to get a state grant between now and May 15th.
But to
Can't
find
be
out,
done.
Anything about getting a grant, but I'd like to find out more, that someone's looked into it and has been told it's a dead
So
end.
you'd like an answer to the question, have we applied for a state grant?
I don't know if it's a grant or maybe they come in and do it. I don't know.
Well,
I
have
wanna-
we applied for state
Well-
funding to support the project? I mean.
All right, rather than that,
Let's get a question that's
yeah,
tangible and can be dealt with, as opposed to, I want to learn about it.
So it seems to me that there's enough questions here that we could hear from the conservation officer or whoever is pursuing the evaluation. Or I'm assuming that we'll hear from the town meeting before we're done, and she could bring the answers to this.
That's my conservation officer, I believe, is my liaison. So let me look into that. Whether I can either get the information from him or that he would come in.
So the point being, I mean, I'm already been firmly convinced we need an evaluation. And so I guess the question here is, Paul, is what is their strategy for the evaluation? And should the state be partnering on it? I think that's what your question is.
Yeah.
But we're not going to solve the problem without an evaluation.
and we're not going to solve the problem tonight without more information.
Okay.
So if Paul, as the liaison, wants to take that on, please.
Yeah.
And then at the next meeting, if we don't meet this Thursday, next Monday, you could bring back that information to us. Okay. On these capital expenditures, do you all think that we should just liaise with these departments with respect to the importance of these things? Or do you want to bring the police, the fire, and the DPW folks back in?
I feel we covered them pretty adequately during our all day.
Right. I mean, that's what the capital, I mean, the thing is that's what the capital expenditure committee did in part, was already vouched for them.
Yeah, I thought that they had given us their report and ratings and everything, but I couldn't find it. Do you guys remember that?
Yes, they
If
did.
not-
I mean, we have a person who's on that committee who could update us, who could remind us or resend the information.
That's
We have a
it.
liaison person on the committee.
Yeah,
Because
that's
I'd like to have those ratings. If we get to the bottom line and say, this is just too much money, we need to, cut or whatever, or add on, who knows? I'd like to see those ratings
Well, I
Didn't make a
mean,
recommendation.
I mean, we could request that Andrew resend to us the work, you know, the report from the capital committee or capital review committee. Andrew's our person on that committee.
Yeah,
And if we have specific questions, I suspect he can answer them.
and I think they did a better job of it this year too, so that everything didn't get a 10 or whatever the rating
Right.
was.
So I can tell you what, oh,
Go
excuse
ahead.
me, Michael.
Yeah, sure.
My question's going to be, we're spending, the bottom line here on the bottom of the second page is an expenditure of $1.6 million in free cash. And a bunch of these capital improvements are free cash. So again, this is where we need to know where that puts us. And I think the town manager showed us that even with the expenditure of that 1.6 million in free cash, we're within the Board of Selectmen's
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah, the numbers that we were presented that are part of the budget package indicate that even after all the free cash expenditures, the free cash, all of our combined reserves will be at the upper end of the range of the reserves that we're trying to provide for emergencies.
So we can afford this. It's
We can.
according to our
We can
policy.
more than afford this. And again, we'll still be in the upper fractions of the reserves when you look at all the reserves that we have in various places. I can't say that for free cash, but free cash is only one of our reserve accounts.
Okay,
I had a conversation with Leah today, and it was around another article, which I'll get to, but we both came to the conclusion that we'll still be well within the range of 10 to 15%. So the real question in my mind is, we've got the money to spend, but do we spend it now? Is it important to spend it now, or do we hold off on some of these things? And I think, I'm going to let that question hang out there, because I'm thinking that when we sit down with the town manager and Leah, and we talk about what our state funding availability is and our federal funding availability, and whether or not we have any strings attached, we'll have a better handle on affordability. But if none of that money existed, we still have enough, we're still within the range of policy with respect to free cash.
And I just want to make a correction, that those totals have not been, I put a note next to them. Those totals on that worksheet are not accurate.
okay.
The reason and that's why I put a note there and put them in yellow. The reason they're not is because many, as you look through them, many of the articles that I think normally would have said just free cash, say RNA or free cash or even borrow. So I don't know how we've dealt with that in the past. So I didn't update them. Maybe because I think some of these, maybe I can find a way to determine which ones are intended for free cash, even though they put that language in there to give themselves flexibility.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I just going back in the history, they write the articles to give,
Right.
as Paul just said, to give flexibility. But I think a question worth asking when Christy and Leah come in is what the expected motion is, because
Right.
they obviously are thinking what the motion is, and then your deliberations continue on the motion. Because I think in almost every case, at least historically, as I recall, they know what they'd like to move. They just leave the warrant article there so they're not boxed out in case something happens. But finding out what their intention is and then deliberating on that's probably a worthwhile exercise.
And traditionally, the finance committee, when they make their motion to support or not support a particular expenditure, the motion includes the source of the funding. So we have the opportunity to make a motion. If it says all of these different sources and we believe it ought to be free cash or borrow or whatever, we have the opportunity to make that part of our recommendation.
Yeah.
That does not change the town meeting motion. It does not change the warrant, but it is our recommendation.
I would like to see what the motions are and what the intended source of spending is so that we can get the bottom line number and see what the bottom line is.
I don't
And-
disagree with that, but if that's the case, then we can't vote on the warrant until we see the motions.
And that's happened to us before.
Yeah, it's not the first time. It's not unusual. I mean, it's just a matter of scheduling our time and our activity.
Well, the warrant, again, was reiterated today. The warrant closes on the 27th of April.
Yeah, but the motions don't close until town meeting gets on the
Yes.
floor.
Yeah,
So Christie should know we're interested in knowing the funding sources for all of these, so we
Yep.
can know the bottom lines before we vote.
Yeah,
I've already
I
made a
left,
note.
I left the erroneous numbers in there because if I delete them, it deletes the formula. So,
Yep.
Okay,
so I'm sorry that they're wrong, but they,
I think
Yeah.
you'll find if you go through the warrant, particularly the capital, I believe the source of the capital funding is generally specified.
well, it's in this document and there were so many that weren't, I didn't.
Again, I mean, if we're gonna work from the document, if we're gonna work from the spreadsheet rather than from the warrant, then the spreadsheet is gonna have to make sure that it reflects exactly what's in the warrant.
It does now, and a lot of them say both RNA and free cash.
RNA free, look at
And many of them
900.
are specified. So again, we need to be clear that if it's both, then the document says both. I mean,
all right. When I will reach out to Christie this week, let her know what our interest is. And when they come in to sit down with us and go through the final budget numbers and the articles, we'll make sure they have that information.
It's fine if the warrant article says RNA free cash or
Yeah.
borrow, but tell us in advance which it is
Yeah.
so we can do the math.
Agreed. Okay. So
Is
you
it
want me to
worth
get,
for me on this worksheet? I could go and add lines to this that have not just free cash and RNA, but RNA plus free cash on one line, RNA. Should I do that or is it worth it? It's not a big deal.
I think if there are multiple sources listed and your spreadsheet just listed the possibility of the three, that would be the most sensible.
Okay, I'll do
If
that.
only one source, it lists that one.
This I didn't update this because I think these are macros, but I'll just do it manually. I didn't want to screw around with the macros that were.
I do want to point out that I just did a quick search through the draft warrant. And although there are some articles that say raise and appropriate or free cash or other, the capital expense ones, it's only the last one that has any wording in it about raising by taxation. There are some other sources from other like stabilization funds, but when I did a quick search through Article 8A through K, none of them say raise and appropriate except K, which at the end says that somebody's going to determine whether it's raised by taxation, but that's because it's almost $1 million.
It's
Well,
also borrow.
I have, guys, I have some information on K from this morning's conversation. I can tell you that right now that there is that rescinding of the $627,000. Right, there's discussion going on right now that we should take that $627,000 and instead of sweeping it back into free cash, add to it from free cash the differential and not borrow, just go ahead and pay outright for the sprinkler system.
Will you
Mike,
remind-
was the $600,000 an authorization to borrow, or was it actually a raise and appropriate?
I believe it was a raise and appropriate because
I thought it was a borrow, but let's go down, let's look and see what the warrant says.
Remind me, was this closing of a previous borrow? Was the 627,000?
Okay,
And, okay,
Not spent.
Yes, town previously appropriated 600 from overlay surplus.
yep,
and we closed that warrant
Which
article?
is not free cash. It was a reserve it's a non-free cash reserve that was established.
their intention, based on my conversation today, was to sweep that money into free cash, that rescinded amount. And then combine that with an additional amount of free cash and go ahead and expend for the sprinkler system rather than borrow.
So how can they do that? I thought the whole purpose of closing unspent warrant articles is so they weren't spending on different purposes, but was the warrant article this purpose anyway?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The reason we got into this issue in the last town meeting and recently is that these accounting practices, while they make it easy for the accounting department and they make it efficient, they're not transparent and it causes people to believe that they're getting free money. and they're not getting free money. It's to in my opinion, to the average voter, it's confusing and they think they're getting free money. And we ought to be, stuff that we decided not to do, we ought to close and then go appropriate the money that we need. And if
So
that means going back and reappropriating
But this
the
is
overlay
like
reserve, then do it.
do a
It's for the
project,
same thing.
and the budget didn't come, and it didn't come in within the budgeted amount. So they had to come back for more money for the original project.
Right.
This
Isn't
isn't
it-
switching
Sprinkler.
projects.
This amount was appropriated for this. It wasn't sufficient for the bids that came in at the time, so they waited. And now now we know the bids better.
Right, so it's not like they're playing with the money. They just came back and said, oops, we were wrong.
I do think they'll have to explain why they don't want to
Yeah.
borrow it though, because this is for the next 15 or 20 years or whatever it is. And why should either current or past taxpayers pay for that?
Well, let me be clear. No decision about
Right.
that has been made. It's at the discussion level right now. So it is appropriate to ask why not borrow versus why expend the money or spend the cash. So let's give them a chance to formulate a strategy for this. And when they come back with that strategy, we'll be able to get some more information.
So is it Leah we should be asking about the funding strategy?
I'm sorry, Beth?
Is it Leah Talbot, our finance director, that we should be asking about the strategy for funding this?
Well, that's who I spoke with.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, not because this is the school department wants the project, but how it gets funded really comes down to a town school decision.
Also a question is, how does it affect our debt base? And so let's let the folks that are supposed to do this
Mhm.
work out the strategy and see what they present to us, and then we can go from there.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah, but yeah, it is okay. I would really like to review again which article is being, if this is a previous article. Hank, is this a previous article they're
I just
tapping
looked
into?
at, while you were talking, I looked it up.
Yeah.
The motion was to use that $627,000 from the overlay surplus account. So this may be a good opportunity, since there's a number of you are new and it doesn't get used very often, that when you talk to Christy and or Leah about the funding strategy, to revisit why the overlay surplus account and not a borrow. So it's not rescinding a borrowing, it's rescinding a vote to essentially apply the $627,000, which is the full amount that was authorized in that previous article to come from overlay surplus.
Okay.
So I'm reading the explanation in the warrant now. The town previously appropriated 627,000. Okay, from the overlay surplus, and that was in April 21st, 2019. And that was very controversial at that time to use the overlay surplus for this purpose. All right, I'm going to have to think about this a little bit and understand it.
Again, basically what we're doing, overlay surplus is a form of reserve. It's a cash reserve. And we're taking a cash reserve and using it for a capital expense.
Okay,
It's the logical equivalent of using free cash. It's just that it has a different name, because
Okay.
technically in the accounting structure, it's accounted for in a different account, but it is a reserve.
okay.
Okay. Thank you, Hank, for that explanation. Looks like Christy and Leah are going to have a lot of questions to answer so far. We talked about Article 16, Town Seal. Forming the committee to look at that.
I think you skipped.
Oh, I did.
There was interest in the sewer people coming in.
Yes.
Actually, I had the next one be discussed was 13, so I think you must have skipped over a line.
No, there was some, John, I did skip 13 by mistake. There was
Yes.
some question when we looked at that, about
Right.
whether or not we need to bring the sewer
Okay, yeah.
folks in.
Well, 11 and 12 are just big numbers.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't need to hear about them. I don't know.
Hank, are you the liaison to the
Yeah.
water and sewer?
Yep, and
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward is what you're saying? Not a big deal?
yeah, I mean, we've got to do major maintenance on the sewer treatment plant. The plant is shared between 3 different towns. And the action, because of the way the contracts are structured, Westborough bonds out the entire amount. And then through some operating fund transfers, we charge off a portion of the repayment of the bonds to other towns. But we have to upgrade the sewer treatment plant because it's been a number of years since these facilities have been upgraded.
I think they presented at the joint meeting, didn't they?
They did.
So I don't know if there's more than that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
There was a question from Beth on the Article 13, the EV charging stations. I know Hank gave you some information at that
Yeah.
point. Beth, do you have any other concerns?
Are they open to the public? Are they for town vehicles?
They're open to the public. I believe they're open for the public for free, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
I think there was a period of time that like first half hour free or something, and then you pay. Or at least that was the intent back then.
Okay.
I think it was part of the effort from Sustainable Westborough. So if you want to hear the backstory, I think Sustainable Westborough might be the group that sort of was behind that.
Well, how long have they? Okay.
They've been around a couple of years, I think.
No, I think it was
A
last
year?
summer they got installed internally.
Yeah, a year.
Who's the liaison to Sustainable Westborough?
I don't think we have one.
Okay, is there an
Just reach out to
appetite?
Pete Dunbeck. I'm sure he'll be happy to join you. So I think
I
it's
was
Pete
gonna
Dunbeck.
say, is there an appetite to bring somebody in for that?
Well, they want to come in to present their new plan, so it might
Yes.
make sense to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they gonna present a new plan or the planning process?
Now, there's a new document that they've been presenting to a lot of committees that I've seen, and it's very eye-opening. It was, for me, it was good for my skepticism.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's actually
very,
a plan now, yes, so they would present the plan.
Walter, that was that email that you sent me,
Right.
correct? Okay, I will reach out to
Pete Dunbeck.
Pete Dunbeck, yes.
Yeah,
I
it's an
think that-
80-page document. It's very impressive.
I think they're very eager to get that soon because there's
Yeah.
something coming up that's time sensitive.
Okay,
Well, they're hoping that different groups will make their recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. I'm not sure that's our purview, but
okay, well, let's see what we got with that. Town seal,
So, and we're skipping over West Park Drive. We're okay with that?
I-
All right, easements.
Yeah.
Yeah, the town seal. I mean, I guess this is the Board of Selectmen's purview, and they would like a review committee. So maybe, I don't know if we have any other role than rather to support the Board of Selectmen in establishing a review committee.
My understanding is that the town seal is decided by the town meeting.
Right.
Okay, okay,
I believe the selectmen started the process to think about changing it because of last summer's political activity. And there's people who, there seems to be a thirst for discussion about whether the cotton gin is a good piece of thing to put on the town seal. And I think after my understanding, because I talked about this on one of my calls with selectmen, since they asked me about being the appointing authority, is that rather than have some group go out and, rather than have 13 different people come in with different ideas, they wanted to have a study committee, appointed by me so it could represent, the whole town meeting and not just be perceived as the executive branch. So I have a few questions about the wording, not about what they want to do, but I'll take that up with the selectmen because to me, I think in the most recent version, it got a little muddied because at first it was going to be that the committee was going to propose a town seal, but now it says they might do that, but they might just propose a process. And I'd want to make sure that I understand what the selectmen actually want because I would imagine there might be people who are interested in being on the committee because they want to work on the town seal, not necessarily on the process. And I want to make sure I understand the intent. But I think that's the whole reason, is to essentially provide a focused, effort organized by the town to, to dig in and answer the questions and think about what it means to have a town seal.
Yeah, John, you're exactly right. My concern with the wording, with the original wording, was that they were going to form a committee to design a seal. And that presumed that the majority of people in the town wanted it. Now, the way I understand this is they're going to form a committee to investigate the interest in the town of having a change in the seal, and then bring that information back to a full town meeting to see if the town does in fact want to change the seal before they go to a new design or not.
I mean, the article clearly says, and I quote, provide a report and recommendations to a future town meeting that may include a proposed process for creating a new town seal.
Yeah.
So the most that they're going to do is, again, in terms of the charter, the most aggressive thing that I would see them doing is proposing a process for creating a seal, as opposed to coming forward and proposing a seal.
Well, where I have questions, Hank, is that on the fourth line, it says that part of the purpose of the committee may be to consider proposing a new town seal after a public process. And it
Yep,
doesn't
I
say
mean,
that it doesn't say that there's an intermediate of this group coming out. So that's where it got muddied, is that that was considered confusing.
It's
and
not
then
a
they
well-written article, John. It's not clear to me. I take my hat off to you. I would not want to be the person responsible for that committee.
Yeah.
So I will. I'm going to send an email before the warrant closes,
Right.
just to make sure
Right.
that I understand what the selectmen actually want, so I can set the expectations of the people who want to be on.
Yeah.
And honestly, John, when they come to the point of proposing a new town seal, we should be retaining the services of a designer, not an ad hoc committee to propose the design of a seal.
Well, it really all
Not
depends.
necessarily.
It really
The
all
last
depends.
one was done by high school kids.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. It's a whole big, it depends. Well, and I won't go into it now because the meeting's already running late, but yes, the current town seal with the pie crust and everything. And I've got the stuff out of the history. In 1967, there was a call for the 250th anniversary committee to come up with essentially a seal for their marketing. It wasn't the town seal at the time. And there were 8 or 9 different design elements that the people on the 250th anniversary committee took from all the high school submissions. And that turned into to essentially, so they acted as the design committee. And so one person did the pie crust shell, one person, did the town hall thing, and they took these design elements. So I think that's part of what this committee is going to decide, is how do we go, if the town wants to change the seal, how do we go forward coming up with a new one?
Well, I think you have to take that question back to the selectmen.
Yep, no, I know, that's what I said. I just wanted to explain to you where my thinking was coming
All
from.
right, let's move along.
Yep.
The Establishment of Disability Commission. When I read this article, my first thought that came to mind was, are we not in compliance? Perhaps, or is this just perfunctory to line us up with the Mass General laws?
Yeah, so, my question was, I'd like to just learn more about it. Like,
we clearly are not the town facilities in general are likely to not be ADA compliant under the current ADA laws. Of course, that's acceptable because the ADA laws came in after the facilities were built and they're grandfathered.
Regardless, I would like to learn more about it by bringing in somebody that could tell us about the committee.
Right. Is this essentially a precursor to hiring someone whose task is to make sure that we're ADA compliant?
We've already done that. We have an ADA compliance officer, He used to be the building commissioner. Now he's got a new title. I forgot what it is.
Community Development Director.
The community development director, and I have no idea whether he's delegated that responsibility. But Fred was the ADA coordinator for the town. If you want somebody to talk about it, that's the place to start.
Well, I think the place for me to start is to reach out to Christie about it
Okay.
and first of all, find out if we have a compliance officer still,
Well, we do. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt that we have a compliance officer.
and then get an explanation about what's going on here. You know, I'm thinking about the number of meetings we have left, the number of meeting dates, what we have to do to get ready for town meeting. And so when we get to new future draft agendas, you know, I'm concerned about constantly bringing in people to answer some of these questions that could be answered outside of the meeting.
Yeah, well, again, on this particular one here, I mean, do we have concerns about creating a commission to assist the responsible authorities in town with
No,
moving us toward
Hank,
ADA compliance?
I have an interest in learning, and otherwise I don't have an interest in doing this stuff. And my interest in learning is to understand why we're doing this now. Why do we need an article in 2021 for this now to create this? So I'm probably incredibly in favor of this, but I'd like to know more about it, which is the point of what we're bringing up.
Okay. Well, we're going to do our best to get all the information for everybody that wants to learn or make a decision from.
Well, Mike, can I just comment? I don't know that I feel all that pressed in terms of the amount of, if we've queued up Monday, Thursday meetings through the month of April.
Yeah.
And I think I've counted 3 people we'd like to hear from for more information.
Yes.
That's not a super packed agenda yet.
Not yet, but we're not
Okay.
finished yet.
Okay,
Not yet.
okay,
You know, we may very well have wiggle room. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that we're not front loading everything until we get through the whole process.
okay, very good.
Okay, Article 19. Sorry, 18. Facility rental, we skipped. Article 19, the bylaws changing Board of Selectmen to Select Board.
Yeah, does anybody
ahead,
have
please.
questions about that? I think that's been under discussion for a while and the Board of Selectmen's putting it forward.
Only question I
And-
have is, are there any cost implications? In the old days, it would have been, stationery and all kinds of printing and stuff like that. It probably doesn't have any now, but I'd be interested in having that answered.
Okay, so and that's,
A Christie question.
that's probably a Christie question if we're gonna see her anyway. That's just one
Yep.
simple question. Is that gonna cost anything to change the name?
No, okay.
Right. I mean,
John, can you please quickly take us through Article
Sure.
24?
Sure, I mean,
Back to meetings
yes, if I
before?
can't address all the questions tonight, I know you're pressed for not wanting to have people come back, but I haven't read these in detail, but since the last draft, I assume they haven't changed. But I think these articles essentially can be considered bookkeeping or housekeeping, because nothing has really changed other than taking a bunch of wording out there that historically served its purpose, and now it's not really necessary anymore. So if we look at so I'll just go by this little bit at a time for those of you following along. So if we go to Article 23 in Article 2, in Section 1, you'll see that the first paragraph there, all it really says is that rather than having all this transitional stuff, is to just say that traditionally the election will be the second Tuesday in March. And the wiggle room there is unless otherwise determined by the Board of Selectmen. And that's because the current reading of more and more town councils is that determining the warrant, which in a town includes the warrant for the elections, is at the discretion of the selectmen, and the town's bylaws can't force them to tell them when to do it. So I think that's the impetus for changing for all these unless otherwise determined by the selectmen. So it just gives them the legal wiggle room for it to say, the town meeting thinks this is when it should be done, but if there's a good reason, and for instance, the good reasons we had last year, even before COVID, was to have the election different because of the town clerk staff having to deal with, you know, the changes for having a presidential primary and the COVID implications. So that's why the first paragraph changed. The second paragraph change, it used to be the town meeting would start on Saturday, and because there were so many articles, because we didn't have a regularly scheduled fall town meeting, is that it would go till Thursday night sometimes, and sometimes even the following Saturday. So to try to get other organizations to not do meetings during the week, they tried this idea of having a town meeting week where they asked all the other groups in town to not have events at night, so people would be encouraged to come to the town meeting. For the past 5, 10, 15 years that I can remember, nobody's really ever paid any attention to that. There's still Little League games. There's still occasionally events that happen. So the proposal is just to get rid of that.
Hello.
And to just, sorry?
Oh.
Okay,
Hello.
the next part of the,
What do you want?
go ahead, ask a question.
Hank, you need to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry, was it? Okay, sorry, I can't see who's talking because I have the warrant up over. Okay.
Okay.
The next part of it is we tried it last year and people seem to like it, and we're doing it in May. The proposal is to change the start time from 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon to 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. So again, one of my comments that I made to the selectmen when this first came up last year was that the original proposal was to change the order and have town meeting before the election. The reason why this is housekeeping is this does not change the order. It's now election on second Tuesday in March, and then typically annual town meeting 9 o'clock the second Saturday after the election, and again with the wiggle room unless otherwise determined by the Board of Selectmen. And then there's a lot of stuff out there that's really just detail. It used to be that, you know, like, and it used to say that the adjournment would happen on Saturday. If we weren't done by Saturday, it would adjourn till Monday. Well, it turns out that, as you know from watching these, when the meeting adjourns to is really determined by the meeting itself. I've always called for a motion to essentially adjourn and continue the meeting. And so this isn't necessary. It turns out that if the meeting isn't done, well, first of all, the purpose for starting at 9 is with electronic voting and with COVID, getting people in the room and just having them there and hoping that we can always or almost always be done the annual town meeting on one day on a Saturday is something that I think people are aspiring to do. And then all the wiggle room about what do we do if we're not done is all just left to the meeting. And then, so that's why a bunch of that stuff is taken out. So essentially, rather than trying to come up with all the, well, what if this, what if it's, what if Monday night is some holiday or whatever, just take it out and let the meeting decide. And then leaving in no quorum for the annual town meeting. Moving on to section 2. Section 2, you'll know we had this problem with COVID where people didn't feel comfortable that we were ready or they could be safely held on the third Monday in October. And so, and again, there was all this wording about what do we do if it's a problem. And so once again, this has been changed to say this second section just says that the town meeting thinks it's a good idea to have this regularly scheduled fall town meeting on the third Monday in October. However, if the selectmen determine there's a better time and date for it, then they can do that. So it just makes that clear, but it leaves the town meeting clear. And then so that's that. So again, so that's the change. That's Article 23. Article 24 is really a housekeeping item of interpretation that the town had always interpreted it a specific way. However, the town council at the November special town meeting said she could have read it differently. And so Christy and the folks came up with the idea to do this. So if you'll see at the last item, the last sentence on section 1 says no quorum or minimum number of voters. Section 2 ends with no quorum or minimum number of voters. The wording of Article 2, and again, we're back in Article 24 now, essentially said no town meeting other than those described in section 1 and 2 shall take any action unless there's 50 voters. So this is essentially just clarifying that both the annual town meeting and the regularly scheduled special town meeting are the only 2 town meetings that don't have a quorum. and any other town meeting has a quorum of 50 voters. So that's just housekeeping to make it clear from that the town clerk and the town manager and the town council all think that this provides all the flexibility that's needed without trying to essentially micromanage the process in the wording of the bylaw, and tightens up the clarity that neither the annual town meeting nor the regularly scheduled fall special town meeting needs a quorum. So that's why these really don't have any effect other than to make it clear to everyone and to make it less likely that somebody could challenge what the current bylaws actually require or don't require.
John,
Yeah.
have either of those two meetings, the annual or the regularly recurring one, ever been close to just 50 people, or are they generally more anyway?
They're usually more, but the reason this came up is that at the I think it was the November town meeting, there were right about exactly 50 people there when we started, and the town council wanted to be absolutely certain that the early votes, when people were still in line and the 50 people were trickling in, counted.
Okay.
So I'd say it usually isn't a problem. With COVID, with COVID and with all the meeting dates, changing around, it could have been a problem. But this would make it absolutely clear that, that we can start. And again, the reason is typically by the time we take votes, there's 50 people there. But by saying that the meeting doesn't need 50 people, I can start the meeting without it. I mean, one of the great advantages to a good weather, like May town meeting is it could be that there's, it could be that there's 100, 200 people who know they're going to make their way to town meeting, but aren't there at 1 o'clock. And in the olden days, Joe would have to wait till there were 50 voters checked in, even to start doing the Pledge of Allegiance and doing all the preamble. By having a 0 quorum, it lets us start. But I would say I don't recall any time other than maybe one when the meeting started with fewer than 50 people there.
Does it ever dwindle to less than 50 people as people leave at the end of the evening?
It hasn't, from what I recall, from all the vote since I back in the days when we had electronic voting, it certainly never dwindled close to 50. No.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions on this?
I hate to be a wise guy, but the term Board of Selectmen is used a lot in here, and it will have been already voted out by then.
Right. That's,
Does it take effect after the meeting
Well, yes,
closes and doesn't take effect during the meeting?
Yeah, well, we can have somebody prepared for that question, but my understanding is that the wording is that any bylaw that ever exists that said, Board of Selectmen would automatically be changed. But we can have somebody, be ready to answer that question. But I think it's why they wrote the other one rather. But I will say it would be a good idea I don't think you should publish it and pay for the printing of it, but it would be a good idea if somebody had a chance to put a PDF, change bar version up on the town website before town meeting, so people could see where these select board member changes would be. It's helpful for people just to see how pervasive it is and where it changes.
any other questions?
Would it be appropriate for us to ask Christy to do that?
Certainly to ask I think it's appropriate to ask if she thinks it could be done either by her staff or by town council or whatever. Or even if they just took took 20 pages and just said, here's an example of what this change is. Because, the last thing we want is to have an hour-long discussion about, well, what about on page 27 and what about this? I think it would just be useful for people to see an example of what this change will do.
Right.
All right, moving on. Article 25, we skipped licensing. Is there any discussion on the final article, 26 of the animal control poultry bylaw?
If somebody's giving feedback on the draft of version 6, it has 2 lines, Article 26 and 27, both the
Yeah,
same.
we saw that.
Is that okay? That has been fixed. Okay, great. Thanks. I just noticed it. Thank you.
Any questions on that? Any discussion?
So I mean, I saw a lot on the poultry bylaw. Walter said that the one that's passed was a little different. Did you need to hear more on the poultry bylaw?
Yeah, so the one in this version 6 is rewritten from the one in version 5 based on the feedback from that
Okay.
they expressed at the public meeting, I believe. And so that it seems like somebody ought to be hosting. I don't know if that's, but you know, if the Board of Selectmen are having another presentation on it, I can watch that on TV too. But I would like to hear
Would you like Melissa, our animal control officer, to come and explain any of this?
just a 15-minute overview of it's probably sufficient. I think if we're going to make a recommendation on it, we should be a little bit up on it. That's all.
It is available, you know, on YouTube. Do we need to drag? Well, I guess it's not dragging anybody in, but
It's
Let's
2
do that.
hours on, it's 2 hours on YouTube versus a 15-minute
No.
overview.
Well, what I'm saying is that the bylaw has changed since what was
Yeah.
done at the
And I
public
think it's-
hearing based on that, so that it seems like that should be, if a new one is available on.
You know what?
YouTube,
It's there's over 1,000 chickens in Westborough. I never knew that. There's 75 or 80 owners. You know, and I know a number of people who have, you know, chicken owners living all around them. It's an important issue. I don't mind getting 10, 15 minutes from the
Animal control.
from the animal control person who's going to have to be presenting at town meeting anyway. And a lot of presenters use the advisory finance committee as their preparation for the town meeting presentation, and it can be useful to them as well as useful to us.
Okay, I will reach out to Police Chief Lori and
Well,
request
I've
the
already
animal
been in
control.
contact with our animal control officer.
Pardon?
It would be the animal control officer.
Yes, I understand that, but
Yeah.
that's under the police department.
Right.
Oh, it is.
Contacted her. I've been the liaison with her.
Well, then, if you have, feel free to reach out to her.
That's what I'm saying. I have.
Okay. And,
Well, I haven't scheduled with her. I just told her that we have questions
okay,
and what we want.
all right, good. Thank you. Okay. I think we have a good sense so far of version 6 of the warrant. I think we ought to hold the budget numbers that we got in abeyance until either Thursday or Monday. Because I think really those are only the changes to the departments indicated in that document. I'd like to see what's going to happen with the full budget, any other adjustments that are going to be made. I know they're waiting on some article adjustments for the schools. And Beth, I know you sent a whole series of questions to the chairman of the school committee.
But they're currently in the midst of dealing with the whole switch from hybrid to full on or full remote to accommodate the current state mission.
Yeah.
So they're busy.
Yeah.
Now.
So right now, we have to wait for version 7 to come in, which should be soon. And we ought to start lining up, getting some of our guests in
Okay.
for to discuss the budget, the articles that we have questions on.
Yep, and we
I did notice in going through that budget number, I think, I'm sorry Melanie isn't here tonight. I have a big question about fire department overtime. So I'm going to ask her to reach out to the chief to get some answers to those questions. So that when we have the numbers, the final budget will be a little more comfortable with it. So far I've got Sustainable Westborough. Clearly, I'm sorry.
Right. Sustainable Westborough is the one for the warrant article. It's actually the committee that did the climate action plan committee.
Right,
the other
sorry.
one. So it's
Okay.
both, but
It's
Peter
Pete.
is your contact for both.
Right. So we've got those folks. We know we want the town manager and the director of finance in. Animal control. The conservation officer regarding, and Paul, you're going to go back to him first, correct?
Yeah, I'll check whether there's information that can just be I can download or if we want, if it makes sense to bring them in, if it's more complicated then. But if it's something like nothing's going to happen until after town meeting, then I'll tell you that. There's no reason.
Okay. All right. We should bring the schools back. Any appetite for bringing DPW, police, or fire back?
Mike, why are we bringing the schools back?
Well, when we see what their budget is, and I want to have,
That's assuming that their budget changes.
right, And-
I'm assuming their budget's not gonna, I'm assuming their FY 22 budget's
22.
not gonna change.
okay. So if there's no appetite in bringing the school back right now, we won't
I
schedule
mean,
it.
again, the budget discussion is not on their agenda for this meeting,
Right.
for their next meeting.
Okay.
And I would not look to bring them back until they come and tell us they're changing the budget. I
Fair
mean,
enough.
again,
Well,
there's
I
nothing new to
guess,
learn if they're not changing the budget.
Well, we have an open set of questions to them, provided via Beth, that sort of implied that we probably would have them come back and answer those questions.
Well, again, we ought to give them the chance to answer the questions. I do not expect to see any substantial changes to the school budget for FY 22.
I think the funding is going to get complicated too because of is it the CARES Act? It used to be the CARES Act. Now the new one that just passed in January may
You know,
affect.
Recovery
the
Act.
budget.
I don't expect those are not school department numbers, by the way. The school department budget is not a revenue budget, it's a spending budget. So if the other numbers change, it doesn't change their spending budget.
I don't know why we should assume that if that money.
It does, I mean, their budget's a spending budget.
That money is designated for something that's changing every day, how they're
Yeah,
reacting to the
again, well,
COVID.
no use you and I having an argument. I mean, I would just like us to agree that we're not going to ask them to come back and waste their time unless they change their budget.
There may be other financial reasons to bring them back that aren't the budget.
Well, then we got specific questions. I mean, we can't keep running these people through these meetings to talk about the same stuff. I mean, we may or may not like it, but they've been and they've presented, they've asked. And, until they make a substantial change, I don't see any value in bringing them back.
I agree, except not only the budget, there may be other financial implications.
Why don't we, Hank, before we make any definitive decisions, let's wait and see how they respond to Beth's questions.
Right, again, I have no problem with waiting to get a responses to the questions. But we really ought to be careful about not asking them to come back and talk about their budget if it isn't changing.
Agreed. Your point is valid, but pending a whole bunch of fluid issues out there right now, let's just wait and see.
Well, fine, I mean, again, when it changes and when we have some data that says we got more questions and they're definitive, we can invite them back.
So as far as future draft agendas are concerned, right now, we're looking at animal control and Mr. Dunbeck.
Yep.
And I'm going to reach out to Andrew and ask him to resend us the capital equipment review. I will reach out to animal control. Beth, you already reached out to her, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
See where she could plug in on the calendar. Jody, you were going to say something?
yeah, I saw you. I've been noting what you said. You said we might need to talk to the fire chief. Sustainable Westborough is regarding the chargers at the golf
Correct.
course. And he wanted to speak to us anyway.
Right.
So it's the EV chargers.
Yeah.
So when the town manager and the finance director come back, two of the things that on my list is, we wanted the capital projects ratings.
Right.
And then I was interested in just learning more about that rescinded article. I need to wrap my head
Yeah.
around how we just started not rescinding articles. and we're rescinding an article. So I just need to learn about that, the rescinded article for 627. And then the funding sources. I mean, we need to let her know that before we can really make these votes, we need those funding sources.
Now, and I agree with you. And I think that both Christy and Leah would are really anticipating speaking with us again as things clarify for them. I had a conversation with Leah today about the 5.6 million federal dollars and the governor's budget money. And right now there is zero guidance from either the feds or the state with respect to how that money, assuming we get it, and the governor's money is still iffy. There's got to be some clarification about how we're willing to spend that money. We talked about the possibility of if and when the Fed money comes in, using some of that Fed money to catch up with the OPEB payments. She was very clear that we do not have a legal obligation to fund OPEB. However, we both agreed that there was a moral obligation out there. I have a feeling, I don't know what you folks are thinking, but again, pending any strings attached to that federal money and that state money, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of demands on that money from different departments, different folks that have project ideas. I'm certain the selectmen will want to have some say in how and when those funds are spent. But what I don't want to have happen, and I'm suggesting this, that we all keep this in mind, is we don't think about those funds right now. We go through this process not even being certain that that money is going to show up at all. And if it shows up, great, and we'll deal with it at that time. But we should be making decisions on the reality of today, not what might be.
The only thing I'd say about that is that that money cannot be used to reduce the tax rate. And so if we do ignore it like that and then it comes in, it will reduce the tax rate unless it's spent somewhere, and we don't want to just spend it to spend it.
Right.
I think we have to keep that in mind.
Well, again, the money cannot be spent. The money comes in on the revenue side of the equation. It does not come in on the spend side of the equation. The money cannot be spent until it's appropriated. The money has to be appropriated by town meeting. So if the money is not in the budget, it can't be appropriated and spent until it goes through a town meeting process. So it either gets appropriated as part of the budgeting process at the annual town meeting, or it has to wait until we have a special town meeting or a fall town meeting to get appropriated and spent. If the money comes in as a grant earmarked for a particular purpose, it may be able to be spent without town meeting appropriation. I'm not sure.
Well, even with that in mind, if no one votes to spend it, it will reduce the tax rate.
It will not reduce the tax rate until we vote to spend it on something. The tax rate is set based on the spend budget. If we don't appropriate it to spend it for something, it just sits there in a reserve.
That won't be allowed either.
That's not going to happen, Paul. I agree. But the process is that the money can't be spent until it's appropriated by town meeting. That's when we get our vote. They have to bring the money to town meeting for a vote to spend it. If it's not brought to the annual town meeting, it has to wait until the next town meeting.
Anyhow, my point is that we can't just pretend it's not there and then, yay, it's here, because I think there will be implications.
First of all, we have, on the Fed side, we have until 2024 to spend the federal money. So there'll be plenty of time to make a decision.
I do know that they specifically outlawed reducing the tax rate with it.
Yeah, right now we know of no strings. And but knowing the federal government and the state government, there will be things attached to that. There will be restrictions. So my point was, it's out there. Let's not count on it. Let's go forward with the budget process with what we have today. And if it does come in time to do something for town meeting, then we'll deal with it at that point. And if not, we'll deal with it for the next fiscal year at either a special town meeting or the fall town meeting. Because we do have to follow a process.
Mike, historically, the numbers for the budget,
Yep,
the planned spend numbers that are in
Yep.
the budget, as well as the anticipated revenue numbers, kind of get solid when we close the warrant.
yep,
They actually usually get solid before we close the warrant, but they're supposed to get solid by the time we close the warrant. We close the warrant on April the 14th, which is a Tuesday.
27th, Hank.
I thought it was the 14th, so
No.
April the 7th, fine. So we close the
No.
warrant on
27th,
27th.
close the
Tuesday.
warrant on April 27th.
correct.
Super.
That's the-
And we really won't have finished numbers till April 27th.
That's correct.
So, we can deal with the numbers we have between now and April 27th, but things that change after, you're really not a useful thing to do to lock things down until after the warrant closes.
Agreed. That's what I thought we as a committee had agreed that we really weren't going to take any votes on anything until after the warrant closed.
Yeah, I thought it was the 14th. It was 27th to 27th. That's fine.
I guess I'm just thinking too, that the last budget I saw for both the school and the other, the rest of the town was an aggressive increase that might be something we don't want to support, or that the town, the town meeting won't support, on top of everything else that's going on with the economy. And then if someone says, well, don't worry, there's a bucket out there that we might get or we might not get, so it's not as bad as it looks, it's confusing. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it's something to think about.
Well, it's our job to help our voters not be confused. And we have to rely on information from the people who manage this town. So there's a process flow that we have to follow. And I know that Christy and Leah are working really hard to try to get some guidance on all of that, but let's see what happens. Let's give them an opportunity to do their job.
I also this notion of not hearing from the schools again before I vote is interesting to me. I mean, we did have the big group meeting, but I don't remember what their percentage increase was. And I like seeing what the percentage increases are year over year, even over the last few years. So if the schools aren't going to come back to remind us, maybe our liaisons could bring those, point our attention back to the data that shows how the proposed budget for the next fiscal year compares to the last trailing years.
We can easily do that, Jody. It's in the presentations. We can bring the presentations forward that we've seen before. It's just, the school administration is absolutely in crisis with trying to deal with all the change that's going on
Okay.
around them. And
Okay.
I don't want to cause them to come back just because we don't remember. I mean, the data
Right.
is there. If we have useful things to contribute to the process of setting a budget, super, we got to have that conversation.
So we could, I mean, if we want to keep the stress off in a time of crisis, we could open up that school budget book, and you and Beth as liaisons could point us to whether it's exactly what we see on those pages, on which page, or if anything has changed. And we are, have an informed, opportunity for an informed vote on that night. But
Yeah, I mean, if Mike wants to have us, go through the slides that we went through that are part of the last budget package, or if there's questions that come from the detail that's in the budget book. I mean, the detail in a budget book, to defend that, you folks need to provide us what the questions are. so we can go work with the finance manager and get answers at that level of detail.
Okay,
The
so
presentation-
yeah, I can tell you what my questions are now is what is the budget that's going to be proposed and what are the changes year over year for the last 5 years?
Yeah, at the gross level, it's in the presentation that we had, and then we can pull that up.
Okay, great.
Because
Beth?
if you get, I mean, if you get down into the detail of specific account line items, I can't handle that without some help from the finance manager.
Yeah, yep.
Beth, did Kristen Vincent give you any indication when they might respond to that series of questions you gave them?
No. She did give me a little bit of feedback about the gym partitions, which is in the Warren article that's been updated.
That's going to be changed.
Yeah, and there wasn't anything else back yet.
Okay.
And they're meeting this Wednesday, so I don't know whether as part of the meeting this Wednesday, they'll try to answer some of our questions when they talk with the school committee.
Let's
Because I
not try
think-
to all right, let's not try to second guess the school committee.
Well, right. Well, one of the things is I think the school department doesn't like to talk to us till after they've cleared things with the school committee.
I think we're all okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. So they're meeting Wednesday.
So let's get, I'll when I hear from Paul, I'll reach out as I have to do. Let's not meet this Thursday. Let's meet next
Okay,
Monday.
Thank you.
Give
Okay.
everybody a chance to line things up. Okay?
All right.
good.
Do you want to give me some dates to offer to have animal control come in? Because
Yeah, I'll give it to you offline.
I think our 15-minute overview can happen because it's not a budget issue. It's just a what's going on for the
Right.
article.
Right. Why don't I, I'll give it to you offline, Beth. How's
Sounds
that?
good.
Okay. Any liaison reports?
Did we get a new liaison chart yet?
The one we have is the one Sean provided a few months ago, just before.
Okay,
And I suggested last meeting that we just hold off on that until we get through this budget process.
very
Well,
good.
before we get our new person next meeting.
And we do get, oh yeah, the new guy,
I'm not the new guy anymore.
right?
Doesn't it feel good? Well, no, you have.
Yeah, I like being the new guy.
You know what happens to new guys, right?
Yeah, I found out.
Especially when you're not here.
Yeah, especially when they're not here.
You're-
That's right.
Having technical problems.
Okay, any liaison reports? Anything at all?
School committee is meeting on Wednesday.
Okay. What's on their agenda?
I can look it up. I have no idea off the top of my head.
I can look
Mostly
up.
how to go about getting the schools
Okay.
opened up again.
Yeah. So basically, they were making gradual, scheduled, really thoughtful plans for how they were going to do all this, and then they got given a date. You will be open by.
Yeah.
From the
Okay.
state.
Fine.
So
They're
I have,
also wrestling with what, with fail. I mean, fail schools are moving along pretty fast, and they have to worry about how to get fails opened up.
so I'll raise an issue from the master planning process, which the updated, in the second phase of the master plan, the updated goals and actions after public input are going to be coming out in a week or two. But some interesting conversations arise from there. And one in the area of housing, that the state is getting ready to pass some, what's going to be turning out to be mandatory zoning changes to encourage housing with a focus on towns with MBTA stations. So I know Mark Silverberg over at Planning is trying to wrap his head around what that means for us. We're a town that's always kept a 10% affordable housing inventory level, since the 70s. But this new zoning may require some more dense housing in zones near transit. So we're trying to figure out what that means for Westborough. But he was interested in whether he should turn to the Advisory Finance Committee to see what the fiscal impact might be on, an increase, a mandatory increase in higher density housing, because we know that that can increase the school population and that can increase the need for services, which can impact the local tax bill. So I don't know if when the planning board gets to a question about the fiscal implications of a zoning change, they come to the AFC for that, or where do they go for advice on how that impacts the fiscal condition of the town?
They haven't done that in my 5, 6, 7 years on the finance committee. I mean,
Just thought it was a good question.
Yeah, Jody, I would suggest they need to go to the schools are dramatically impacted.
Yeah.
Right.
And, the school board, the school committee has the resources to deal with how school populations change with housing density.
Right, projected impacts.
You're
And
gonna
then
have,
the other big impact is sewer, water, and roads, and the
Yep.
DPW and
Fire.
and I mean, from the police department and the fire department, they don't care a lot other than just total numbers. But the DPW cares a lot.
So it's
And
a
they really need to
complicated,
go
yeah,
there.
Right.
yeah. So
So we had the planning board do a lot of work towards I forget the exact proper title, but the transit village something.
Transit oriented zoning. We put in place transit oriented zoning around the MBTA station.
yeah, the
The-
question is whether that now is going to satisfy the state's new
requirement.
housing
Yeah,
initiative.
it's unlikely that it will.
Yeah. It's not affordable. Yeah. Yep.
given,
The state proposal is what in Westborough we would consider to be very high density. It's tens of units per acre kind of numbers, and we tens of units per acre is an enormous number for Westborough.
It's like new apartment buildings.
Yeah, it's new apartment
would
buildings. It's
also-
multi-story, high density apartment building type stuff.
But it
Well-
would have to be near the transit station, which means
The
we have
state,
a
yeah.
limited amount of available land.
Well, yeah, the state law is within a certain dimension of the transit station. And just by chance, there isn't a whole hell of a lot of land within a mile or two of the transit station. A
Right.
large fraction, I mean, a large fraction of the land that's close to the transit station happens to be conservation land under the DCR.
So what I'm hearing is it's not the AFC that helps them
No.
figure out the cost impacts.
no.
It would be an unusual request for us to get involved.
Yeah,
I-
that
I-
sounds like
Given
an
the
environmental.
complexities of this, we are not the first stop
Okay,
at all.
good answer. Got that. That's clear.
Geez, Mike, I thought you were gonna volunteer.
We're more philosophical than actual factually knowledgeable.
What?
Well, I mean, our role is to look at the warrant and advise the legislature
Right.
on actual
Right.
pending, articles. So this is a different task.
Yeah.
We're definitely.
Yeah, like this is a task for
We're not
professionals.
staffed. What's that?
This is a task for professionals.
Yes,
These are complicated questions
yes.
with
And-
far-reaching impacts.
Okay, well, like I said, I don't believe we're the first stop.
Okay, very well. That's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other liaison issues? Okay, public reminders.
Wear
Anyone?
masks.
Wear a
And-
mask,
Yeah.
get your
and-
vaccine when you're
Yeah, it
eligible.
turns out that Westborough may be the site for one of the mass vaccination sites.
Wow.
That's-
Yeah,
that's
they're
the
gonna
word.
go over to the hotel on Route 9.
Yeah.
Doubletree.
The
Double
movie
tree, right.
theater.
No, don't say it out loud. They'll think it is. The Doubletree has been deployed for public sector vaccinations, and it was mentioned in the Globe that it could potentially be another mass
Right.
vaccination site.
Yeah.
Whether it is or isn't, get your vaccine.
I'm going Friday.
Yay.
I am vaccinated. I am done.
Hey, congratulations.
You know, that's just because I'm old.
Yeah, but more and more people are hitting the acceptable age limits. Like they're
Yes.
opening,
Yeah,
Thanks, Bev.
sorry. And then, yeah, like they've agreed to vaccinate teachers. I think that's going on. Like, so different, more categories are opening of people who are eligible.
okay. Any other public reminders?
Hope
Wonderful.
not, I'm running out of paper.
What?
I said, I hope not, I'm running out of paper.
I'm going to help you here, Walter. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second,
Second,
Ms. Bloomberg,
Blumberg, yes.
Mr. Leslie. I'm just looking at my screen.
Sure, Leslie, yes.
Mr. Rouch,
Roush, yes.
Mr. Ugal,
Yes.
Ms. Hensley,
Hensley, yes.
Moretti, yes. We are adjourned. See you next Monday.
See you on Monday.
All right,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
A lively discussion.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Jeez.